So apparently Xbox, who's supposed to be dead and leaving the gaming industry, is still somehow making hardware. Why are these guys clinging on? Anyone who is or has been observing may ask this question. I don't think this is clinging on. I'm just being facetious. I think this is them thriving. The conversation is very interesting because just look at this. Xbox Wire announces, in collaboration with Meta, we're excited to announce the launch of MetaQuest 3S Xbox Edition. Right underneath, a few minutes after, we have PlayStation saying, stay tuned. We've got new details on upcoming PlayStation VR 2 games coming shortly. You see what's going on here, ladies and gentlemen, is this whole conversation about hardware was very interesting. I saw a lot of people talking about the PSVR 2 and this one game that was stopping support. And some people were saying, well, that game and its, I guess, cessation of support was going to kill the PlayStation VR 2. I don't know anything about VR. I don't touch them. I'm not going to touch them. Not interested. Played on one of them. Thought I was going to vomit. And so it's not, my thing. However, some people are saying it's interesting timing. Okay. Now, it's one of those things where people are like, oh, y'all had me for a second. I put that VR 2 back in the box. Apparently, they also want to basically go ahead and push back and compete in this area. But I don't know if there's a lot of confidence for PlayStation in this area. In fact, I don't even know if there's a lot of confidence for Xbox in this area. What's actually amazing, in my opinion, to me, is the fact that the so-called talking heads, right, for the longest time made it seem like, man, Xbox should just quit the hardware business. Do y'all remember that? Do y'all remember that Xbox was failing according to a lot of these people? Do y'all remember that this is basically all that they tried to do in terms of just gaslighting everyone? I want to go back and quickly, show something very interesting because this to me is really going to inform how gaslit a lot of people have been in these last few months. For instance, if you take the infographics show and their YouTube video that they titled The Real Reason Xbox is Failing, which was put out a month ago, you'll realize that these, outlets or these talking heads or these, proxies are, in my opinion, some of the most brain dead in the analysis so far of Xbox compared to where Xbox is right now. And it's interesting because I wanted to go ahead and just show this. Like, I wanted y'all to see this for yourselves, just so that you can see how all this nonsense and this dross had been put out here. And guess who wants to now use the timing to advertise, oh, our VR is still relevant because the other company that y'all said is no longer going to be doing, consoles or is not doing hardware and blah, 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 is now fast tracking their way into much more hardware production, pretty much piggybacking off of everybody else who's already, got a process to get in there and do it. This is the thing with technology and the collaboration that happens is once your ecosystem is open, pretty much, you become a collaborator with a lot of people should you choose to. And now what Xbox is doing is they're going to run circles around PlayStation in this regard. They're going to run circles around Nintendo as well. I mean, you see the old school methodology of doing business, right? If you're valuing your customer can work, but if you're not valuing your customer, you're going to have a big challenge that basically besets you. If you actually think about, a lot of the way this stuff has actually gone, you'd be surprised at the end of the day how much, these folk have basically, dialed in and, gone to cling on to a lot of these different, parameters. For instance, check this out. The comments on this video is what's actually very funny at the end of the day. The way people perceive this video back then and the way people are perceiving it now, it's actually very interesting. Just a lot of misleading statements, a lot of misleading perceptions. If we even just pick any point of the video to start on.
Hated consoles released in the last 20 years. Not only did it require users to always be online, something that created a problem for people without super stable internet connections, but it didn't allow for sharing games or buying and selling used games. This really struck a nerve with gamers who had built up a whole market around used games. It also focused a lot on making the Xbox One a multimedia console, touting TV and other capabilities. Many Xbox customers got annoyed with all those extra features. It almost seemed like Microsoft was focusing more on the other media capabilities that no one asked for, rather than the games themselves. The company's also forced users to buy the Xbox One bundled with the Kinect sensor, adding $100 to the final price tag. Microsoft eventually phased out the Kinect due to a backlash from gamers and a lack
So
of...
it wasn't the Kinect first. It was the TV. Okay, sure. Give it to you, the TV. But one thing you all failed to realize, the infographic show, is that those consoles are still being supported. And so for y'all to come out here and say that Xbox is failing in terms of that is just the biggest joke in clown world that I've ever seen. I cannot believe that this production was actually, that somebody invested in this production to bring this out here. And they published this video. And the video has now garnered about 470,000 views. It's very interesting that this is in light of the moves that Xbox had already announced that it will be making and is announcing that it's making, right? And so the skepticism that you see here from people over here is actually very interesting, right? This person said, y'all ever going to fix the grain issue on the PSVR 2 helmets? Made darker games unplayable, right? Sports Champions VR. So you're saying it's not dead? Because this is the perception out here. I'm not saying anything about it being dead, right? But it's funny though, right? That at the end of the day, this is what this company is actually, doing right now. And this is where they are. That they're now trying to piggyback off of the fact that Xbox is pretty much taking hardware to a whole different perspective. Now, I don't know what Xbox's hardware offering is. I'm not, in terms of the VR side, but when you look at the way things have transitioned, right? That's my primary aim. I'm watching the way all of these perceptions are now being changed. PlayStation is now being seen in the light of the company that they are. Exactly the light of the company that they are. Because at the end of the day, they've done business in a cutthroat way to give themselves this very interesting perception. But there's only so much perception can actually, go in front of reality. Now, their hardware side and their closed ecosystem, well, somewhat closed, is now having to face the market and the market constraints. And Xbox is now putting way more constraints on them than they could have ever imagined. So take it for what you will. I was quite shocked to see that both of these companies are now advertising VR stuff. And these guys have had, this VR thing going for them for a long time. And apparently it just seems like it's just another periphery that they're more than likely not going to be able to see enough support for. Again, they were probably relying on the third-party markets, which seems like on their console, their VR selection may have not appealed to their audiences. I don't know. But it is what it is. Talk to me in the comment section. Let me hear your thoughts. And hopefully we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.